the forest is an asset. So we want to show it to all stakeholders. A lot of people think the moment you cut down the forest only you get some money. So that's the intention and what the people believe. So we want to show it the other way. When you protect the forest only, you get the income. So in various means.
We are more than commercial. It's a social community business enterprise because we look after people. In the plantation companies, we look after 1 million people resident.
Sri Lanka's agriculture sector has several challenges, not limited to low productivity in land and labor. Hello, you're with Echelon's Rocketship experience, and today's panel is defending stakeholder capitalism in the agriculture sector. We'd like to welcome Roshan Rajadurai, who is from Hayleys Plantations, Nilantha Jayanetti from Sarvodaya Development Finance, and Heminda Jayaweera from Thuru. Let me start with you, Roshan. You've been in the agriculture sector now for 40 years?
Yes.
Okay. That's a long tenure, almost all of that in tea, I think?
Yes.
I ask you to step back slightly, and you have several stakeholders. Like in any organization, in any business, you'll have multiple stakeholders. If you look at the stakeholders that you have, and the challenges facing the agriculture sector, who are the stakeholders and how are they impacted by these challenges?
Thank you, Shamindra. As a agriculturalist involved in large-scale commercial plantations, in my mind, I believe the employees, in our case, the plantation workers, are the most critical and the most important stakeholder. Why I say that is if the employees are productive, if they are contented, and if they have a good quality of life, automatically everything that the other stakeholders expect or look forward to from this enterprise will fall into place. So for me, the key stakeholder in our business is the employee, meaning the plantation worker in our industry, almost 97% of the human resource is what we call the operators, like female pluckers, sundry workers, factory workers. The staff and executive card is at the most 3%, and an estate with about 700-800 workers with about another 2,000-3,000 dependents would have one manager and two assistant managers with about 70 to 80 staff cadre. But there will be close to 700-800 workers and their dependents. So coming back again is the worker, the employee or the operator.
Very quickly then, if you had challenges, if employees are the biggest stakeholder, the most important stakeholder in your view here, if you had challenges, what do you think those challenges are?
The most significant challenges are low land and labor productivity. These are linked to each other. Because the labor productivity is low, the potential that we get from a particular piece of land is less or low. So this has a sort of symbiotic relationship.
Sure. Nilantha, I'll come to you. Nilantha, you are a CEO of a finance company, but a slightly different one. Its genesis is in a social movement, although you're now a commercial venture also. Again, step back slightly and talk to us about who are your important stakeholders and what challenges do they face, you think?
Our important stakeholders are the farmers.
Right.
And the next level is the consumer, including you and around this entire people in this country. Because the farmer, whatever things they produce and what they make, of course, consumed by the Sri Lankan or maybe the consumers in overseas. So because of the nature of this business and the things that we have identified as challenges there are three things. One is when we look at these farmers, they are more they are traditional, and they are using low technology or sometimes no technology at all, and the value is very low. So these are the three areas that we have identified as challenges or the gap. So our business, although we are a finance company, our business model is different. As you said, this is in line with the main vision of Sarvodaya. So we want to provide them high technology, or we modernize their traditional way of doing agriculture business, or the farming, and we bring new technology, and through those two steps, we want to increase more value to their final production.
Sure. Heminda, I'll come to you. So, your role, your what you do, amongst the many things you do, you are regrowing forest. Is that a fair way to describe it, right?
Yes.
And who are your stakeholders here? When you are trying to regrow degraded agricultural land or something like that into a forest, who are you trying to serve? What's the commercial case here?
Yeah, thank you, Shamindra. I think what we are trying to do is my organization, Thuru, what we try to show is that the forest is an asset. So we want to show it to all stakeholders. It could be, for example, the villages around the forest. A lot of people think the moment you cut down the forest only you get some money. So that's the intention and what the people believe. So we want to show it the other way. When you protect the forest only, you get the income. So in various means. And also for the other stakeholders, for example, is maybe it's a government, or it could be a private sector estate owner or someone. We want to show that if you have say 1,000-acre land, you can't grow all 1,000 acres. It's not possible. But then there are certain areas that you can maintain as a forest, and it's not about just having it as a forest, but then you earn something out of that as well. It could come as there are different terminology like permaculture, agroforestry, and there are various ways you can keep it as an asset. So you can earn money out of that. For example, now we look at forestry, and we grow plants like maybe kitul and various other, even bamboo, and how we can make it as a sustainable income for people around that area. So that's the model that we are looking at. So obviously, as you said, all stakeholders. It could be villages, it could be the estate owners.
Sure. So somebody might be a little confused. It's easier to understand Roshan's approach to this on Nilantha's and their stakeholders. I'm a little confused about your stakeholders, right? This is an exercise that requires investment, maybe capital. How does that equation work?
Yeah, so it's a different model altogether. So I think what we see is that there's a lot of land which is, if you take a say estate, there are a lot of lands which not been used properly for that particular purpose. For example,
Sure.
the tea estate, there'll be 10 to 20, maybe even more than that, which is left it as like arid land or maybe as forestry. So we can make sure that regrow that as a forest and include various plants which can be useful. For example, as I mentioned, there is something that we do at Deniaya is we try to grow useful medicinal products inside the forest, and also try to identify places where we can make sure that it's a place that the people can come and visit. For example, it could be tourism, it could be anything else. But then, say for example, you can't let people to go to Singharaja like place. Getting too many tourists into Singharaja also very dangerous. But if we can add that Singharaja feeling outside Singharaja at a place like a buffer zone, then we can create like a tourism.
So who would just very quickly, who would invest capital or funding behind this? Is it like a hybrid model of various sorts of purpose-driven capital?
So right now there are companies, organizations. We work with Mathurata Plantations, LOLC, and they have a model that they want to spend some money on creating this. So obviously it's more of a CSR initiative for the time being, but then it's a business integral as well. So they look at in terms of, obviously there's a arid land or a degraded land, and what we can use for a better purpose.
Sure. I'll come to you, Roshan, right? And basically the two of you, Nilantha and Roshan, you have shareholders.
Yes.
You have raised capital in financial markets, and shareholders expect a return. How do you sort of balance this? Is your conversation with shareholders, should it be different, or how do you get shareholders bought into this?
That's a very important question because we are a PLC, and obviously there are shareholders and the expectations are a reasonable return for their investment, and we have very competent, responsible boards. So they take a 360-degree view.
Right.
They are not only profit driven. I represent Hayleys. It's a totally owned Sri Lankan company with Sri Lankan interests at heart. So they look at the triple bottom line in terms of the planet, the people, the profits. More so because we are a Sri Lankan company, our social responsibility ethos is very high. So this basically the management drives the business, and the board directs the sort of corporate ethos and the social responsibility aspects.
So are you suggesting there is no compromise necessarily on, say, let's say, return on equity? Here's a hurdle rate. Let's say this is how it happens, and we would like something over the hurdle rate.
I want to reassure you on that aspect. Actually, when we do, as I told you, when we put a lot of focus, when we put a lot of effort and ensure that our employees are given the premium and provided opportunities and facilities, automatically the performance of the company in all spheres, not only financial, reputational, branding, sustainability, HR, you name it, everything improves, and that has a knock-on effect in terms of performance and profits. In fact, just off the record, like last decade or so, we have got the highest profit and highest quality. That is without focusing only on that. When you do the other things, automatically the whole game increases.
When you say you got the highest profit, you're referring to listed plantation
Yes,
companies?
profit per hectare as a measure,
Right.
price of tea, there are measures, KPIs. So we are quite happy that the path that we have chosen, or the board has permitted us to follow, has given results in the long to medium term, without any doubt.
So you sincerely believe that is due
I
to your
sincerely believe,
approach?
and we do everything possible to support that thinking, that action on the ground.
Right. Nilantha, is the conversation easier at Sarvodaya Development Finance? Your genesis is a social movement that is now 40 years in its making?
62 years.
Okay, 62 years since its founding. But Sri Lanka has changed also, right? So, and you have shareholder capital, you have private sector investors who I don't know if they value to the degree that you would as a movement value that social impact. What is the discussion like? How do you sort of balance these two expectations?
So when we look at this shareholder return, of course, last financial year, we declared 70% of our profit as dividend, because the like-minded people who gathered around this finance company, being the first development finance company, the first impact investment finance company listed at Colombo Stock Exchange. Of course, we made big impact to the society, and 54% of this shareholder of the Sarvodaya Development Finance are the people in the village level, the societies. So they also expect a return. So therefore, what our business model is something that we want to work with them, and we want to make sure we should pay them a fairly big return. At the same time, we are being a dynamic organization which is directly supervised by central bank, and we have fair amount of depositors as well, and we want to make sure their return, their interest income. So in this context, we of course we look at the return, and we look at the business opportunities that are out there in the market, and based on these elements only we make our investment decisions. Of course, we are driven by the main vision of Sarvodaya, and while making impact to the society, we believe in when we make investment and when we create value to the society, and we can capture value in return. So this is our basic.
70% distribution of profit is a very high amount of profits to normally be distributing. Is that a one-off thing, or is something you are determined to?
The board of directors and the company main vision is whatever the things that we earn should go back to the society.
Right.
And as I told you, more than 50% of the ownership is with Sarvodaya. And what they do is, when we declare a dividend, they go back to the village level and they again reinvest those return what we declare as dividend in order to get the benefit or give them the benefit of this investment.
Sure. So it's a cycle.
Yes,
I'll come to you, Heminda. Now yours is, I don't know how you set KPIs for you. I'm sure you're thinking about some performance metrics that you want to measure success against. You set them now and you measure success against them in the future so that you have a goal. How do you set KPIs in what you're doing?
Yeah, so our operation is very purely altruistic KPIs we have. For example, we have a KPI, or rather vision, to plant 1 million trees in Sri Lanka, which we have done about 100,000 right now. And we have exactly all the trees mapped on a digital space, which is the innovation part that we have done. So what we saw was that, say planting 1 million trees is usually the forestry department has identified to plant a tree to a tree level, it takes about 1,500 rupees per tree. So that's the cost that you have to insure. So you are talking about 1.5 billion investment to do 1 million. So then, I mean, you can't do it on a model where it's like a donation model. So you have to have a monetization model into that. So what we developed through Thuru is to develop that monetization model where different stakeholders get their benefits in the long run. So that's what we are trying out. Obviously, it didn't come up, like one-off. We have tried various methods. Some failed due to COVID time because you couldn't do anything during that time. But now we have developed a different model and something that is quite long term now. So we have identified there's a model that you can work with different stakeholders. That's a business integral as well.
So you are addressing stakeholder needs here because you want this to be sustainable. You want these regrown forests to be there in 50 years
Exactly,
from now, right?
Exactly.
Because stakeholders will get some benefit out of it. But the investment to do this is something you have to generate outside of the stakeholders, outside of those immediate stakeholders.
Some of the stakeholders have to fund it. For example, if it is a state, they will fund. Or if it is a totally outside organization, but they want to say that we have planted, say, 10,000 trees, 20,000 trees. So there's various requirements there. And also we build the NGO funding as well for certain projects. But then, we prefer it goes as business integral. Then only it has a value at the end of the day.
And businesses are seeing value in this.
Exactly, yeah. They see, especially plantation sector. We see that a lot of companies looking at our services.
What is your sense about why they see value in this? I mean, let's leave the altruism aside. Is there can they make this case to the board, or they have to rely on altruism?
So one of the things that we see is that I think any plantation sector, we see there's a lot of lands not being used. Obviously, maybe it's part of forestry or maybe part of, degraded land. But then if you can grow forest there, because the cost is quite low compared to agriculture plantation, the cost is quite low. But then in the forest itself, there is various techniques where you can use, we call it analog forestry, we call it permaculture, where you can grow actual maybe fruit trees to whatever, and then it can be a product for the villages and even for the company as well. And also you can look at various other models like carbon insetting to carbon offsetting to, and even if you can have the volumes, you can go even for carbon trading. So those are the things that you can look at. But on a CSR perspective also, you can show that this is the impact of the organization in terms of the valuing the environment. So there's a culmination of things happening, and I think Sri Lanka being a biodiversity hotspot for the last maybe 20-30 years, people were talking about it, and also now very recently COP27 talks about a lot of improvements on how we should move from the typical way of looking at this, the whole climate change aspect. I think Sri Lanka has an enormous amount of potential to bring foreign revenue dollars in this particular area.
Roshan, I'll bring you in, and something that struck me in your first opening remarks were your reference to low land and labor productivity,
yes.
Right? To some degree, as a company, you have been successful despite the odds posed by these two challenges. But step back and then look at the industry. How does tea and rubber also, maybe you have some rubber plantations also. How does the industry deal with this, you think, over the long term? Is there an innovative solution, or you can only do incremental things?
No, I think just stepping even further back, when the tea industry and the plantation industry started, first it was coffee. Coffee was a seasonal crop where workers, because of social and economic conditions in India, they migrated, took that 22-mile trip to Sri Lanka, came for picking coffee during harvest times, collected money and went back. But with the devastating years, so there had been two migration streams come for how people from the upcountry went to the north and east for rice, paddy harvesting season, collected some extra money, got back. And there was a regular flow from 1840s to 1870s in Sri Lanka because we were under the British government and there was easy passage. They come across to Manna and walk 1 weekend, collect money like a contract, take a lot of money back home. So they were happy. Then with the devastation of the coffee industry, tea had came in, and tea requires year-round labor force. Traditionally, to maintain 1 hectare of tea, we need what you call labor days. We need about 900 to 1,100 labor days. So along with that, the transition to more permanent sort of employment happened. Fortunately for the industry at that time, in 1870s, you all know there was a great famine in South India where 6 or 7 million people died. And people were in poverty, penury, disease, sickness, and generally people who came, is historical fact, came to Sri Lanka were from the lower classes. I mean, you know the problems in India regarding caste. So there was a pull factor for people to come to Sri Lanka where wages at that time were 3 times as much as what we call the Madras presidency. So purely economic pull, like how people in Sri Lanka now go to Middle East. So with that, the model, the colonial planter had absolute control, monopolistic control. He could dictate terms because they were in an alien land under his care. So they were dependent on him, and he got the work, the required amount of output, and it was a sort of golden crop. Everything that you made was sold at a premium. Of course, then come 100 years, government took over the land and they became government employees, and thereafter privatization. But still we are stuck with the 150-year-old colonial daily wage based model. At a particular time when the British plant had absolute control, he had very, extractive power. Like he could say, do it and it's done. But today with the advancement in HR and labor and statute, situation is different. So the Planters Association has consistently promoted a model where we make the worker a stakeholder, or what do you call it, a capitalist in terms of the land that he works on. The classic case is the smallholder model in Sri Lanka. Within 30 years, they extended their cultivation extent by 3 times. That is because he is not a daily wage based like a servant labor. He is his own manager, his own boss, and he goes and works. He gets paid for what he produces. So we have introduced this revenue share model to plantations as well. Of course, they can't own the land. Land is owned by the government, neither by the company. So we have assigned areas, as he says, certain areas, because of out-migration of workers. We are not having adequate workers to pluck the required grounds. So rather than abandoning, we have said, okay, there's land, you go and harvest. And we have given assigned blocks of land, and the workers who don't want to be called estate workers or don't want to be under estate management or staff supervision, they go to the field, flexi time, some go at 6:30, some go at 8:30, care for that block, pluck the leaf and hand over, and we have predetermined price. And I have shown this and told everybody, the people who are doing revenue share model are earning more than 2 or 3 times as that of a normal worker, because the potential is there, possibility is there. Right, because in the smallholder sector in Sri Lanka, we have 450,000 operators, and the average smallholder size is 60 perches. That means just enough for one person to work. So I work in one block here, but tomorrow I have no assured work. I have to search for another block and get into a bus and go somewhere. So there's a challenging business, whereas ours, each plucker has about 3 acres, 5 times as much extent, and you are provided housing and other amenities in the estate. You just step out and go to 10-15 minutes, you are in the workplace. So it's a good model where the families can live in the estate, prosper. Family institution is strengthened rather than fathers coming to Colombo or young girls coming to Colombo. So this is a model that we have to resort.
You said earnings were 2 to 3 times.
Yes,
now,
of course.
Is that a average norm, or this is the exception?
No, this is an exception where the revenue share model is in practice.
Yeah, so everywhere the revenue share model is in practice, there's earnings of at least 2 times.
It depends on the willingness of the people. Some they get 50% more than their normal working, some 75, some get their householders who don't want to be registered workers, they help. So there are people who earn 70,000-80,000 rupees over the year. We have in fact told the unions, why don't you support us? Because then their constituency, that is their membership, will earn more and they'll have better quality of life, and we can get more crop with a higher price, and again in a circular way they benefit. So I think in going forward, trying to stick to this 150-year-old archaic model, I think we are heading down the wrong way. The model now all over the world in agriculture is self-managed entrepreneurial work. Because we have seen over my 40 years, in general, workers, they feel you are working for a company or government, they do minimum to qualify for the minimum wage. But if you give a system where you open out and say you can earn more 80% of what you earn is for you, then their mindset changes and they actually maintain the better fields because they have proprietor interest and sort of ownership. And I think this is the way to go.
If you look at the deployment of this, if you put a measure of success, you think it's like absolutely successful or it's fairly experimental?
Absolutely successful, but there are different narratives. People who have no involvement, who have no stake in it, they come out with different things. We have invited them, come and see, talk to the people. People for various reasons give out different narratives. Talk to the person who is doing, why are you doing it? What is the benefit? Would you prefer this, or would you prefer to go at 8:30 to 4:30 job? So they have to speak to the operators. We are on the ground and people are asking, sir, give us also land. And this is catching on. 30 to 40% of the corporate sector crop now comes in this model. Of course, obviously 100% of the smallholder crop comes. Our corporate sector average is about 18 kilos. Now in the smallholder sector, for each kilo they pluck, they get 40 rupees. For argument's sake, if the smallholder plucks the same output, say on 20 kilos, they'll earn only 800 rupees. But the reality is they earn 1,500, 1,600 because they pluck 30, 40 kilos. Our corporate workers in areas like Denia, I have seen personally, by about 12:30, guys are going home. So when I ask the manager where I go, so they have plucked about 30 kilos, they are going home. So win-win. I win because I get more crop than I usually get. They win because they can go early and get more money and quality of life is improved.
Just very quickly, you told us a percentage of how much of the RPC controlled land is under this scheme. How much was that?
RPCs in Sri Lanka, regional plantation companies, we grow tea in about 35% of the tea land and produce about 27 to 28% of the national crop. Smallholders 75%. But 30 to 40% of the regional plantation company crop comes in this manner, roughly.
Oh.
And it's increasing year by year.
Wow, as high as
Yes.
30. So this
name may be different, but the practice is the same. Contract plucking, outgrow model, revenue share model, different ways, but eventually, end of the day, you pay for production or pay for productivity rather than pay for attendance.
in memory, this would have been not at 30% a decade ago.
No, in 1992, it was 100% name, what you call name. That is, you work from 8:30 to pluckers mainly, 8:30 to 4:30 and pluck 18 kilos and you pay whatever the minimum wage agreed. Men work for, actually it's very funny when you look at it, when I look at it as a planter, women who are more skilled and better in plucking, they take from 8:30 to 4:30 to pluck 18 kilos in very good fields. Generally, when you put men for plucking, we generally give not so good fields because they don't take care. They bring the same output in 4 hours. So there is no problem of being able to pluck or not being there. It's the mindset. So we have educated them, talked to them and changed them, and now the same women go and till from about 2:30, they pluck 30 kilos and come if they want to. So what I am saying is NGOs, the unions, the plantation management, others must support this to support the people to earn more rather than putting unnecessary, how shall I say, different versions of this.
Nilantha, you also, when in your opening remarks, you sort of echoed something Roshan is saying about low productivity. You said agriculture is traditional, low tech, and low value adding. How does, even if you had intentions to sort of change this game, how do you as a company then do that change, drive that change?
In fact, what we did was we are as I told you, we are a provider of financial solutions, and around that, of course, we had backward integration and forward integration both.
Right.
So we were able to get hold of the companies that are providing technology and the companies that are doing this research and development, and the companies that are adding value, this value addition for this basic level of the crop. So as a result, it's a combination of the producers and the finance provider and the buyers, as well as the other stakeholders like research and development and the people who are keen on investing in this area. So
you have your fingers across the value chain basically.
That's right.
You cannot just be a finance company and say, okay, my job is done. My loans are being repaid, so I'm fine.
So and how this has been enabled through our system, because the Sarvodaya, the main movement, Lanka Jatiya Sarvodaya Samadhana Sangha, that is. You can find every nook and corner in this country, and they have their own centers, they have their own societies. They are developing this concept, and they are helping them to become more entrepreneurial level of investors and the farmers. So there is another system which is happening around around in our main business. So that has that movement has been the enabler in this journey of collecting these all the stakeholders into one goal or one objective.
Sorry, I want to support what he says because this is a typical scenario in the plantation because our scales are very small. So we can't get this kind of high productivity that like our competitors Kenya is getting because they are using mechanization, automation. With our scale, there's a physical limitation of using this large mechanization model. But what you say is like number of small holders getting together and forming a larger cluster and them having leverage and momentum is a better model because you get synergy, you get unity, you get in lot of asymmetries leveled. So I think that's a model in fact we are doing. We are promoting groups to form cooperatives, they get together and buy machines and tractors. So that's a model that we should look for a small country like Sri Lanka.
So you have your as a finance company, you're central bank regulated. You have to meet certain regulatory norms about capital, about liquidity, about risk-based capital. This is an extra burden for you, is it? How do you sort of juggle that?
When the business model is right, of course, this regulators' point of view, what they look at is whether we are managing our company profitably and whether are we meeting their obligations and the objectives while making sure these areas are being properly concentrated and looked after. Of course, running our business, we don't have any objection from the central bank because we are helping this country and the backbone of the economy. And therefore, now one good example is, of course, as we all know, the paddy or the rice mill is centered in one area of the country. So we are into the business of decentralizing this activity by empowering our farmers and the villagers to set up their own small level or the medium size rice mill. So that has been a model, that is one example out of many that we are doing. So that has been able to generate much needed income of the season. And when we look at there are two seasons, Yala and Maha. Of course, the farmers during those the off time, they can increase their income and they can generate employment and they can get involved in this value chain system as well.
Is this business profitable for you? Is it, if you look at the rest of the industry, are you doing as well or better, do you think?
When we look at, we do better.
Okay.
Right? And so I will give you one example, the collection ratio. And since our business, 80% of our business is outside Western Province.
Right.
Right? And because when we look at the number and the market size, is the villages and the rural sector is more than the 80% of our country. Is when you look at numbers, the rural population is somewhere around 17.9 million. So we have a bigger market share. And so when we now, since we have empowered them and we are involving in income generating activity with the farmers, our loan repayment, the collection ratio has been in fact, how should I say, I can say better than the competitors. So we are better off.
Right. Heminda, if there is greater sensitivity to the impact on the environment about commercial activity, business activity, right? Is your organization one that sort of depends on this sensitivity increase to exist? Or is there other factors that sort of make it possible for you to be doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I think what we have identified over the course of last 5 years since our inception, I think globally we have really misinterpreted the word called sustainability. So a lot of companies think sustainability is about rupees and cents and all that, maybe looking after a few of the stakeholders. But we think with all climate change aspect and all that, what we realize is most of these big companies don't understand the science behind our own extinction. So I think, so one of the things that we do right now, I mean, we go as Thuru, which is meaning trees. So we look at the entire value chain of trees, not just about planting trees, right, but we look at, right now maybe we are working on planting trees, but we look at even to the level of extractions from, say, Sri Lankan indigenous plants to native plants to going into pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, or even perfumery industry. So we look at all that, and we actually just started our research lab at Stringtech as well very recently. So we are experimenting all that. So Thuru means the entire value chain of trees, looking at Sri Lankan biodiversity, the value chain and all that. And one of the things that we do right now is to educate big corporates on how to connect with the nature, because that Science 101 is missing in a lot of corporates to understand why we should focus on, we should work with the environment for our own benefits. So we train them, we do a lot of, organization trainings to understand what's the value, even to the level why we should not use water too excessively to that levels, water to air to, we see that even now in Colombo with all the issues that are coming from the air related, and we explain the reason behind it and why you should work towards that. So I think that's something that we work on. So it's our own survival. So it's not about just sustainability, it's a survival of us.
So I suppose you could argue that Sarvodaya development finance is balancing both its social and capital, shareholder needs, right? In this model, how do you go and make a case to companies to be, almost like a social enterprise, at least partially?
We are a social enterprise, yes. We are a social enterprise.
Does it make commercial sense then?
So, yes, I think it's what we have to understand is in any social enterprise, I think Sarvodaya knows better, it's not easy. So there are much easier ways of making money. So if your motive is to make money, yes, your social enterprise is not for you. But obviously there has to be like a very innovative business model, something that nobody has thought about it. So I think we are working a lot on the business models, the different business models, and also since from our background of science and technology, we bring a lot of science and tech into it. So that ease out a lot of things. And what we see is that when you show the way, now our philosophy is working with trees from the entire value chain. And people see there's lot in Sri Lanka if you really do. Now, for example, I think we talked about bamboo, right? So bamboo is the most sustainable building material so far found out. So if you can grow bamboo, that itself will sort out a lot of issues now Sri Lankan construction industry is facing. So that's something that you can start now. So we are doing that initiation for various companies to start growing bamboo, right? And we work with Morato University on various technology, how to harvest bamboo, joinery, all that. And then we work on various organizations on, for example, they may be just a cosmetic company, which they bring cosmetics out of other country. But now we are looking at how we can develop cosmetics using Sri Lankan plant-based, extraction. So that we do research now. So we are looking at we will make money 20, 30 years later, but not now. So that's our model.
I think this has been a fairly insightful conversation. I will ask each of you to sort of put any final thoughts you have onto the table. Can I start with you, Nilantha?
Yes. So the working with the farmers, and of course what we are doing is we are meeting their requirement in terms of financial and the providing the other assistance, which is not the main objective of a finance company. At the same time, looking after the stakeholders, and at the same time working with many regulators, including central bank, is something that we have to strike a balance. Otherwise, what will happen is sustainability that we are talking about will not be there. So this is something that we have developed within the organization, and our system within the organization has enabled that in a beautiful way. So I think this is what as a corporates that we want to look at in future when we set up companies, and to give some return, or to help our much needed community. At the same time, we can work with them in order to meet the other obligations when you look at the shareholders' point of view.
Right. In listening to my colleagues, I think I get another facet of the commercial plantation industry. We are more than commercial. It's a social community business enterprise, because we look after people. In the plantation companies, we look after 1 million people resident. And of those, 90% are non-worker dependents. So only 115,000 are working. So we have a saying called from womb to the tomb. From the time the lady conceives, for custodial childcare up to 5 years, up to the grave, we look after health, medication, everything. And then we look after the environment. As he said, now most of the plantation companies who are net zero, science-based targets, you name it, we can tick the boxes in terms of sustainability initiatives. That did start in the last 5-10 years. For the 150 years, we have been surviving because we have done it in some form. Of course, now it has a nice scientific approach to that. And in terms of providing employment, livelihood, looking after the communities around us, not only the plantation communities, other communities. So if I take that, I would say the plantation system is like a total systems management operating in the areas where they work, like in terms of soil and water and environmental biodiversity protection. We have to do it because it's part of our business DNA. If you don't look after the soil, it will get eroded, bushes will be unproductive, and the negative effects. So I think in that terms, I can sum up saying that while for over 150 years we have somehow sustained the agricultural industry in relation to tea and rubber plantations, which we manage, going forward, we can be as good as any other industry or even better, provided the politicians, the stakeholders and operators take a very holistic, progressive, positive approach to the solution, mainly our stakeholders. 95% of them are daily paid operators. How we can improve their quality of life, and in improving that quality of work life, and overall, when they come up, the industry will come up, and our brand name as a most ethical, most sustainable, most quality of Ceylon tea will prosper.
I think very visionary level. I think now every year we consume Earth by the time it is July or August. So the consumption that is, as a 8 billion population, we finish the Earth, whatever the consumption, by the month of July or August. So actually we are now over-consuming about 70% of Earth resources. So I think that's, everybody should understand. There's a science behind it, and then that everybody should understand. So I think why we are in existence is to show that this has to change. So 1% temperature rise will be, the cost is about $56 trillion. This is about close to 3 times of the US economy. And 3% increase in temperature is about $500 trillion, which is about 5 times of the global. So whatever that you do, in the simplest thing has a lot of money in it, and the people, everybody will start talking about these things in the future. So I think we are, as a Sri Lankan organization, we are now getting ready for all protecting the environment and the entire human, and of course the existence of us. So I think that's the philosophy that we work on. So I think whoever into that business has a lot of potential. So that's what we believe. So that's Thuru.
Right. So Heminda, Jayaweera, Roshan Rajadurai, Nilantha, Jayanetti. Thank you. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.